This meeting is being recorded.
Welcome to the January 22nd OpenJ9 community call. As we do every week, we'll open it up to any questions around any topics that anyone would like to discuss at this point. Next week, we have Marius lined up to do a lightning talk on JIT server. So that should hopefully be a good intro or a good re-intro into the JIT server tech that's landed as a tech preview in the 0.18 release. If there are ideas on lightning talks that people would like to give or would like to hear, please add them to this agenda and we'll see if we can get experts lined up to those talks. We'll take a quick look at the recent user-raised issues. And if I look, sort of the only most recent one is a performance problem with Craft. So we'll need to get somebody to take a look at this. If anybody's a Minecraft expert or is looking for a reason to have Minecraft running on their machine, this might be worth digging into. Definitely something we'll need to get somebody to look at in the near future.
To prevent these problems happening again, I think we should definitely have a dedicated team exclusively playing Minecraft from this point on.
Sounds like a great idea. All right.
Can we assign that to a milestone?
We have not yet.
I think we should.
All right. I will assign it to 0.19. Make sure that the JIT team is aware. Dimitri, I'm going to tag you as well, just on the off chance that this may be heap related.
Okay.
The other issue that's still been floating on this list for a little while has been the phantom reference and queue discussion. I think sort of the next step there is that we should core file and get it into MAT and see what's holding on to this class loader that's staying alive, just to validate the current theory that our in-queue behavior is different from what's expected. Andrew, have you had a chance to update the download trends?
Yes, I have. They show slight decrease in share. The slope going down at the end.
It doesn't surprise me, given that the Java 8 and 11 and 14 have just had new releases, and ours have been a few days delayed. So it would not surprise me.
Yeah, I mean, that slope, though, is probably about a month long, that slope. Yeah. It's interesting. Those slopes, it's very obvious changing in gradients. I think those figures, at least for OpenJ9, are very much driven by Docker pulls. Our actual binary downloads from the GitHub binaries are actually very low, but the Docker pulls are quite significant. And the fact that the gradient changes quite suddenly probably means that a lot of those Docker pulls are from single sources, which is not a great. Well, I'm sort of guessing a bit, but if it was more general, then you wouldn't expect sharp changes in gradient like that. See what I mean? Because there'd be more variance in results. Yeah, do you see what I mean?
Yeah, the expectation is that this is driven by a small number of users
Yes.
or user groups.
Yeah. But for whatever reason, have a Docker pull script environment, whatever that they're pulling frequently, which is changing from time to time.
So I will take an action item. To see if we can get more details on the Docker Hub pulls. I had been talking with George about that prior to the end of last year, and we'll see if he's been able to get more information out of Docker Hub. All right. We'll move on to the release then. The 0.18 release is not, well, is quasi-completed in that we got the builds for 11 and 13 out, and then discovered a late breaking issue with one of the OpenJDK changes for JDK 8 that needed to be fixed. And so this has driven us to do a 0.18.1 release for JDK 8. And one of the areas we've been focused on as a community has been driving adoption of OpenJ9 in other communities. And so we've also respun JDK 11 in this 0.18.1 release to pick up a fix for the Quarkus community. It's a community we've been engaging with recently to get them to support OpenJ9 on both 8 and 11. And so having this opportunity where we needed to do a respin anyways, and we had one quite safe fix to put in for them, made sense to do that, given that we were doing some effort of respin. It's a decision we probably should have discussed further on either Slack or had a open call to discuss directly, and we'll work on doing that more openly in the future, but just so that everyone's aware that there is a 0.18.1 release occurring. So there are new builds going up and adopt. In particular, 8 was required given the change in OpenJDK's behavior. And we saw this as a good opportunity to fix a community issue that we've been engaged with recently. So both 8 and 11 will be updated to 0.18.1. Does anyone have the state of those builds at Adopt right now?
Yeah, so the 8s are nearly run through. There's a couple of platforms still running tests. I put those in first ahead of 11 because we do already have a release for 11 and wanted to make sure the machines could be used. And 11s are now in as well, so they've started building. So we need to go through the test results for all of the builds for 8. I haven't seen anything that are things that we're not already aware of, glancing at the results. But once they've completed, we'll have our nice new TRSS viewing tool to make the job easier. So hopefully by the end of today, they'll be up. If not today, tomorrow morning.
Okay.
The 11 will be tomorrow because it'll take 9 hours or so to run all the builds and tests.
Right. So thank you to everybody who's been involved in getting those builds respun and tested and reviewed. Does anyone have any questions or concerns around the approach we've taken here? I know our release is not quite complete, given that we're still running builds and reviewing results for the 18.1, but I would like to start the release retrospective discussion on what's gone well with this release and things, that haven't gone so well, or things we'd like to try and do differently for the next release. So I'll sort of open things up to people, and I'll try and take notes as the discussion occurs.
I'm curious about the particular failure that caused us to respin. Was that a failure that was not seen prior to the actual release run that happened a few days ago?
I'd have to check the exact timeline to see when we had the fix. We were aware of the failure, but I'm not sure the fix had lined up with when we were doing our release builds.
Yeah, I asked because I want to know, was there any way for us to have, avoided that .1? Could we have seen it and fixed it as part of 18.0?
One issue, Shelley, was the fact that 8 was late anyway.
Yeah.
So we took the decision to get 11 out with the 18.0 code, but then it was 8 that actually required the .1 aspect of it.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
So we were we didn't find out till later, really.
Yeah. No, that's fine. I just wanted to make sure if there's something in the way we're doing things that would have caught it, or we should have been doing something different that could have caught it. I think for the 8 announcement too, it wasn't really known, or I didn't see that until the weekend. Was that the case?
Yes. So on the proposed release day, the scheduled one of Tuesday in the evening, our time in Europe, the message to say that the tag had been added to the repository went up very late. And that was accompanied with a message saying, but the tests haven't finished yet. I shouldn't really put the GA tag on until they have. So I'm surmising that during that testing, something was found and that then needed to be fixed, because certainly a couple of days later, it took a couple of days for a new tag to appear with quite a number of code changes in the security area. So.
Okay, cool.
So we're in a bit response mode at adopt after that.
Yeah.
And as I say, unfortunately, one of those changes required this change in OpenJ9.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and I'll just say a few other points. We knew this from past release retrospectives. We didn't get these updates to TRSS in time for this one, but they will be landing later this week. As I watch people triaging releases, it seems to me there's things we can do to help this along. One of those things is to have a convenience button on TRSS that creates a release report that could be just pasted into a Git issue. So we have an open issue to deliver this. We also will be we've added a way for people to put comments in TRSS to say, I'm looking at something. So we'll push an initial version of that into TRSS. I expect we will refine that as we go. But these are things that we wanted to do to help the triage effort go smoother. So just mentioning those here.
Yeah, certainly the triage report would be fantastic, because we, as you will have seen, we're handwriting those, cobbling them together. The other thing that I find a bit frustrating is that you have to wait till all the jobs have ended. If we could do anything to, as one of the subordinate jobs completes, get that information available in TRSS, that would be brilliant too.
Yeah, we actually have that ability. We had the streaming feature in TRSS. We have disabled it because there was the threat of OpenJ9 adding restart capabilities into Jenkins, which then completely toasts the streaming feature in TRSS. So we should talk about this since we have that TRSS tool is used by multiple people in multiple places. We'll have to open up that discussion in an open issue to weigh the benefits of that versus how it will break if you end up adding restarts into Jenkins. I agree with you, though. That's a very frustrating aspect if you're waiting on an AIX build to finish just to see the results from the other platforms, for example.
So about the last minute change we had to do for Java 8, the change came in build 7, which we didn't test at adopt. And then when we went to test build 8, which was the final GA build, then we found the problem. So I think
Okay.
we've talked about this before. I think one thing that would help, we did test build 7 at OpenJ9, but we're not running the GT reg tests. And we talked about doing that before, but never got it enabled. So
maybe just create an OpenJ9 issue, and I mean, it's straightforward to add those jobs.
yeah, what happened last time is I did some builds and there were a number of problems, and I opened issues for those problems, and some or maybe all of them got resolved. I don't think there's still a number of open issues on AIX at least. But I should do new runs and see what the latest problems are.
Yeah. Yeah, and worst case, I mean, you always can run them in grinders, but obviously it's better if you have a separate tab for triaging and seeing things in a real job.
Yeah, a grinder means I have to manually start
Yeah.
on every platform, whereas if it's just done in the release build or the nightly build, then it's there to look at.
Mm-hmm.
So one of the things I think that did go well with this was the early decut. It gave us a slightly more stable base on which to have testing done and to help identify regressions that were added along the way. There was a change to class get methods that I merged into the release, hoping to address some user issues, and instead that particular change caused a regression which was detected by some of our external users and reported to identify that quickly and back it out using some of those milestone builds. So I think the early decut date did help our stability in this release. But that more care needs to be taken when merging in late breaking changes.
Yeah, so we were actually very optimistic about being able to do the release without a hitch because we'd got the test run so clean prior. I suppose the bad news was that didn't quite come to fruition, but we did know that it was the late breaking changes that were causing us the problems.
Yeah, and I was going to say one of the things that went very well was the fact that there's been active triage thanks to some folks in Hersley there to keep the OpenJDK stuff looking green.
And so sorry, Shelley, the early build.
I just think the ongoing triage that Morgan and Adam and others in Hersley have been doing has been helping. I noticed that there have been issues in the past month raised at OpenJ9 that got resolved, real issues found and resolved that then weren't surprising us just before release time. . . . . . . . . . . . . . . . . . . . . . . . . . . . . . . . . . . . . . . . . . . . . . . . . . . . . . . . . . . . . . . . . . . . . . . . . . . . . . . . . . . . . . . . . . . . . . . . . . . . . . . . . . . . . . . . . . . . . . . . . . . . . . . . . . . . . . . . . . . . . . . . . . . . . . . . . . . . . . . . . . . . . . . . . . . . . . . . . . . . . . . . . . . . . . . . .
Yeah, I second that. The quick reporting of the failures really helped us.
Hi, this is Sue. From a docs perspective, this release was the first release where the developers took on the task of writing a lot of the documentation themselves, with the docs team moving into a more editorial role. And certainly from my point of view, it went really well. You know, developers stepped up to the job, and it really helped to flatten out some of those peaks in our workload, which causes real pain towards the end of a release. So from my perspective, that was a big success. And thank you to everyone that was so cooperative. That's great. I'd be interested if there's feedback from development, of course, on how they might be helped to do that better.
So one other thing I think we should also be looking at is we had a lot of changes that sort of ran right into the decut date. And as devs, I think we need to be looking at our schedules and planning that things either need to make it in a little bit earlier than that decut date to give some wiggle room for any ongoing fixes or changes that need to be made. And try not to sort of get all the things in at the last minute. So that may take some schedule planning or pushing features from a particular release to not ship until later. We have some scheduling work to do and around merging PRs and planning for when work will complete. Any other comments or thoughts on this release? I think I'd like to touch on this again next week in the call as well, just if there's other thoughts. So if something to continue to think about in the background. Just a reminder to everyone that Java 14, we are fast approaching our code split on February 9th. Again, that's an earlier decut, but it'll give us more time for stability. And our GA, of course, is going to be around March the 17th. So for everyone to be aware and working towards that release date. Given that we've migrated to the earlier decuts, I'm going to remove that. Just hand things over to Shelley if she has a quick update on at Adopt.
Sure, very quick one, because in 2 minutes I dropped to go to the first Aquavit meeting, which will be a open test call that we're hosting at Adopt. We're switching over to use the V3 API for testing starting this week. There are a bunch of fixes and updates to both the Docker scripts and the Docker-based testing. There's an initial contribution of a version 2 of the dashboard, thanks to Lan. There are updates coming, as I already mentioned, to TRSS that will be pushed to the instance later this week. And I guess, I don't have an update on the doc stuff. I'll bring it up in the TSC meeting tomorrow to find out where that's at. I know Simon was asking on about that. Other than that, you know, we're still in release time. We'll finish triaging off 18.1 and then likely later this week turn back on the nightly testing. So that's about it.
Thanks, Shelley. And that new dashboard looks really nice.
Yeah, and so it's in a repo called Dashboard V2. If you have comments or feature requests, etc., I'm sure you'll just raise an issue into that. I'll try to add the link to that repo here in the minutes so people can find it. All right, thanks.
Thank you.
Bye.
Adam, do you have an update on the machines and state of our infra?
Sure. So as usual, updates in red. I added an update in orange this week because it's the same update as the past couple weeks. That hasn't changed. So AX is still the same story. No movement there as far as you know. For Z-Linux, we have the Z15s working now. So the Z14s have been returned, and I've hacked them out of the farm for now because they're still technically turned on. We've also put in a request to Cindy for more instances. So hopefully those come soon. No other issues in terms of machines that I know of. For Artifactory usage, we're slowly climbing. We're up to 80% now, and that's since we turned on that test flag. So we might need to look into that because we're getting close. And we're also climbing on the root disk, and I don't know why, so I'd have to investigate because we're up to 75% used on that. It's not a very big partition, so something to watch out for. In terms of larger issues on our radar, I think the next thing would be the Artifactory UNB issues. So that's coming up with a solution, either a second Artifactory or some other solution. So that would be next on our list.
Is there an issue to describe that, Adam? Or to describe the
I was
plan for
thinking
that?
about working off the existing issue from when we originally set it up because it's still open. I haven't commented in it yet, but probably do that today or tomorrow. I can get the link and post it there.
That would be great. Thank you.
That's it for me, unless there's more questions.
Doesn't sound like there's any questions, so we'll move on. Sue, is there any update on the website?
Well, our web devs here are sort of familiarising themselves with what's been done so far, and I expect that we're making some good progress. So I'll contact you in around a week or so, and we'll see if we can find a slot to give an update to the community call. I'm not sure whether next week's too soon, so just give me a few days, and we'll suggest something.
Okay. Next week we have a lightning talk from Marius lined up on JIT server. So if it would take a longer period of time or be something you want a more detailed discussion on, it might make sense to plan for it to land in February.
Okay, sure. I'll bear that in mind. Thanks.
Is there any other topics people would like to discuss today? All right. Thank you, everyone, and we'll meet again next week.
Thanks.
Bye.
Thank you.